So I have to open this by saying Felicity has been my book crush for many years. The way that this whole thing started was I was interviewing her sister Emily, and this is before any of us had children, and we had time to read. So I was like Emily, like, we were talking about books, and she was like, you know who represents the best authors is my sister Felicity. She's a literary agent in London, and she has all these like great literary thrillers, which is what I love. And so Rosamund Lupton, Tamar Cohen. I know. You know, Tamar and I email each other.
No, I know. We've become like
because
friends.
of you.
I know. And Tamar loves it, and she thinks somehow that I'm connected only because of you. I think,
stop.
You know, I'm serious. She's like, wow, you know a journalist because you were a journalist at the time in America. And I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm just that proficient. Yeah.
So I guess if people always say to me like, oh, you've been doing this a long time, you should write a book. If I came to you and I said, hey, I should write a book, what would be like your, I guess, is there advice that you can give for breaking into the publishing industry?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think, so there are many people who are writing books, which is absolutely what we need and is very exciting. I think that, for me, I think I have at the moment 300 submissions that are sort of sitting in my inbox, which sort of threaten me at night, and I'm aware that I haven't read them and I need to. But I think you have to have a story that you genuinely feel passionate about, and not a story that you have derived from bestseller lists as something that you think will work for the now. We know that there was kind of vampire lore for kind of years on the back of Twilight, and after Hunger Games, there are sort of many kind of adversarial YA kind of stories set sort of in far-off places with blood and gore. You just have to write a story that you absolutely believe in and you think is individual and original. And the other thing is you just have to work and work and work at your writing. Ugh. It's like any other job, and it's a muscle, and you just have to you have to just be happy to be editing, you have to be happy to edit yourself. When you're at the point where you sort of literally can't look at it anymore and you really feel that you can't do anything else to it, that's still not the time to send it to me. You put it in a drawer for a month, and then you come back and you read it, and then you decide that you're ready to send it in. Because I think a big problem is a lot of people they write something very quickly and submit it, and it just never gets the attention because it's quite clear that it's a first draft.
Do you instantly know if something's going to work? Or do you give yourself like 20 pages?
I think sometimes from a cover letter, you can tell that you should reject something. It's the brutal truth.
Like it really is that bad?
It's really badly written, and or they'll call me by somebody else's name, or a really great cover letter is very much like, I think that basically the best analogy I can make, when you guys go into a bookshop or you're shopping on Amazon, you have sort of how much money you decide you're going to spend on a book, and you have to disposable income is becoming less and less. So you go into the bookshop and you're attracted to the title, and then you turn it over and you read the pitch on the back of the book, and if you like that, then you're going to crack the spine, you're going to read the first page, and it's very similar to me. A title will interest me, I'll read the cover letter, which will have the pitch in it, and if it's a really great pitch, then I'm going to start reading immediately, and if it's not, it's going to go in the 300 that I've got to read when I have a moment on the weekend. So you really have to work. Don't send a book in under untitled. Make an effort to make sure each piece sings and sings in concert, because yes, when I get all of those three things working, I'll be picking up the phone to call you, but there'll be 5 other agents who'll be calling you as well. And then, I become the kind of paranoid, aggressive person who's just desperate to sort of be your friend, and I want to represent you, and I'll read through the night and sit down and do an editorial letter, because the really good stuff is rare.
So let me ask you this. We were just talking about Disclaimer in the back. I don't know if you guys know it. It's this amazing literary thriller?
Yeah, it's a literary thriller. Yeah. It's one of the books I'm proudest of to have represented. She and Rosamund Lupton are 2 women that I've worked with from the beginning of their careers, and they are just they're just the real deal, and they are such nice people. And Renee was a screenwriter, and she wrote a first book that I couldn't sell. And she went away and did this Faber Academy course, which is a creative writing course run by this very esteemed publisher, Faber & Faber in the UK. And she wrote this book, and it was inspired by the idea of what would you do if you discovered a thriller, and it was entirely about a secret in your life. So the book is entirely about something that you have carefully kept custody of and thought nobody else knew. And that was the sort of basic concept for the novel. And we sold it in about 30 territories in sort of 2 months, and it's I think the 3rd best-selling debut in the UK. It got a huge Janet Maslin New York Times review here, which was amazing, and we've sold the film rights to Fox Searchlight. And it's such a lovely story because She's sort of in her mid-40s. She had been a screenwriter. We couldn't sell her first book, and yet to many she appears an overnight success. And she finds that really amusing because it sort of took a number of years to get to that point.
But when you got that manuscript, I mean, really, the ending is like what kills you.
Yeah.
Did you? I guess how did you get through? How did you know it was going to work without without skipping to the end?
The writing was superb. It was really clean and clinical, and it was controlled. The book was like a muscle. Everything was working together. There was no fat. She had these two storylines that were just genuinely creepy. It was almost like a dual stalking narrative. You had this woman who had found this book that was entirely about her, who's trying to find out who the author is, and you know who the author of the book is as the reader, and you know that he is insinuating himself into different areas of her life. And that tension, that kind of Hitchcock-like setup, it's like that violin string that just keeps stretching thinner and thinner, and you know at some point it's going to break, and you sort of can't wait for it. And the best thing about that book is, yes, it breaks, and then you have this sort of tidal wave of repercussion, and then this big twist at the end, which is, I mean, I would encourage everybody to read it.
We're not going to give it away because I mean, you'd basically ruin it for everyone, and I don't buy into that whole like spoiler alert thing. Like, just don't write spoilers.
And I'm always scared when talking about that book that I'll go and then just mess it up for everybody.
What is the number one mistake that people make when they submit something?
That they submit
Calling
to the
you
wrong
by
agent. Well, yeah, they could call me. I get called Emily a lot, which is weird. You're like, no, sorry. Or I get people weirdly actually submitting acting reels to me as well. So then I think, well, no, that like, can't really help you there.
Google much?
Yeah. But actually, generally, I think if people submit to the wrong agent, so I look after Daphne du Maurier's estate, and any interest that I have in books will derive from that. So literary thrillers is a big part of it. If you send me a really wonderful, warm, funny, commercial women's fiction piece, that's great, but I'm not the right person for it. It should be my colleague, Sheila Crowley, and I'm just going to feel uncomfortable representing it and end up saying no. So I think find the right person and really do your research. Everybody, acknowledges, hopefully, their agent in the back of the book, and if they haven't, then maybe there's a reason. But you can track down, if you have an author who you admire and think that you have a similarity to, you can find their agent and work out who you should send your book to.
And Felicity is married to Stanley Tucci. They wrote an amazing cookbook together. She makes a killer zucchini salad. Like, she's got the peel thing down.
Yeah, that sounds impressive. It's basically grating zucchini into a bowl. So
you know what? I didn't know how to do it until I met you. Who was your toughest editor when you were writing?
Stanley, actually.
Really?
He's a real pain. Yeah, it was really annoying. I would write an introduction, and he would go, Fee, I don't know. Do you need to say it that way?
You're like, excuse me, what?
I go, well, it is my recipe, so I sort of thought it was appropriate for me to sort of tell the story, and then he would sort of edit it down. But he's actually a really fantastic writer. He's written screenplays, and he has a really lovely turn of phrase. So unfortunately, he was more often right than wrong. And we did that thing. You send in your book, and we tested all these recipes, and we were like a stone overweight because we'd eaten pasta. And he just made paella after paella after paella because he couldn't get it right. And the kids were just like, oh my God, enough with the paella. Like, even in the dead of winter, he'd be out there like making a paella with the rain coming down. And so, by the time you sort of eaten everything endlessly and sent it in, and then they send, what happens when you do a book, you get these sort of page proofs come back, and you can actually look at your book and sort of see what it looks like. And then you sort of start rewriting everything because you realize it's sort of bits don't make sense. And when you're doing that with your husband, it is both intimate and frustrating, I would say.
What if you could invite 5 writers to a dinner party?
Yeah, 5. Ooh.
Just 5, living or dead.
I'd have Jennifer Egan, who I'm very lucky. I work with her in the UK, who's has the most extraordinary mind of anybody I've ever met. She's just wonderful. I would love to have Nora Ephron because I met her once and she was the best facilitator of dinner party conversation I've ever met. She was like, you talk about this, you talk about that, you be quiet. And it was just amazing. Like, it's just fantastic. Well, I was like, okay. Who else would I have? I'd really love to have Andy Weir at the moment, who wrote The Martian, because I read that book and absolutely loved it. I thought it was just amazing, just a whole big world and so funny. And it was sci-fi that was just so smart and so funny and so engaging. I'd definitely have him. I'd have Kate Atkinson, because I think she is just remarkable and extraordinary. And
Case Histories is just...
Case Histories is amazing.
It's like one of the most perfectly written books ever.
Life After Life is one of my favorite books of all time.
I have that. I haven't read it yet.
It's brilliant. I would recommend it. It's fantastic. And I need a fifth. I think you'd have to have like John le Carre. You'd have to have The Spy Master, because you just hope that you could just get stories out of him the whole night.
Well, I'm glad you have one American in there. That's good. Or Jennifer Egan's American.
Jennifer Egan's American, yeah, two. I'll give you two. Yeah.
How do you find time to read now? And actually, do you still enjoy? How do you keep your enjoyment of reading when you have to do it for a living?
I think it's really important to read books that you don't work on, you don't represent. And just like The Martian was a classic example, a publisher gave it to me, hadn't even published at the time, and I read it and couldn't put it down and neglected everything else. And it just was the best reminder of why I love my job and why I got into it, and that I was always like this geek as a kid. I'd always like troll off to the library and get 12 books and bring them back and just read them. And you just have to keep in touch with that. And it's hard, particularly various times of the year. Like now is Frankfurt Book Fair, so there's just a tsunami of submissions and lots of people sending people things to read. In terms of finding time to read, we can now do electronic submissions, so you can read all your cover letters like on your iPhone as you're going to work, and then you try and create time on the weekend. But we have kids, they have maths homework, that takes up as much time as my kind of homework. It is hard, but I think the moment you stop doing that and focus on everything else rather than that, your job isn't the reason you wanted to enter the profession in the first place, and it's not as exciting. And the best feeling is when you read something and it is wonderful, and the adrenaline rush is just lovely. I really love my job, and it's that bit that's the best of all.
What if you could do like a percentage, like is it 1% of all submissions that work, or 5%, or?
I'm trying to think. So I took let me see, I think maybe every year I might take on 2 clients that I will sell, and I get thousands of submissions, so it's less than 1%.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I assume you have readers, right? Assistants?
I have an assistant who does a lot of the vetting. I will read the cover letters and say, get this in, I think this is good, you should look at this, and then she will sort of start reading some of the chapters. If she then alerts me and says, you know what, actually it really is good, I will then jump in and read alongside, and then we'll talk about it. Then if we take on a client, I will then edit, and then I'll do a second edit, and if by the time I get to a third edit, like I still feel it isn't quite together, she may then read the draft, because she won't have read the others, and she can be objective and say, you're right, the ending still doesn't work. Or I might work with a freelance editor. I sometimes do that if it's got to that point where there's London book fairs coming, you really want to get the manuscript together to get it out and submit it ahead of like a big publishing moment.
Do you ever work with writers and you do revises and then you just give up? Like you realize it's just not going to come together?
There's definitely been a moment or two where I've worked and done redrafts and I've thought, I still don't think this is where it needs to be, but at this point I've kind of tortured this author enough and I just need to submit it, and we're going to have to let the world speak, because an editor might just see a way through and they might recognize that the writing's really good or that the writer really has potential. So, yes, I have had that happen, but more often than not you just want to crack it before, you let an editor lay eyes on it.
And not that you're like, the global expert on the global, publishing industry.com. But I just read that really interesting article that print books are actually like not in decline at all. And that, do you find that to be the case?
I think the ebook thing, ebooks are very interesting. Ebooks have always done better in certain areas of the market. So they have never excelled, obviously, in things like cookery or highly illustrated. Those markets have been preserved by print. They have definitely steadied. I was talking to a thriller editor actually just yesterday and asking him, and he said, yes, from about 2013, they can see that it's not accelerating. And everybody who predicted that it was just going to always grow and always grow has been proved wrong. We were talking about this earlier, however, have these... The thing about ebooks that is interesting is that a lot of people will just download things that they can get for free or 99 cents or $1.99, a lot of the self-published. And we don't really record those numbers through publishers because they're not publishing them, they're self-published. Andy Weir was actually an example of somebody who was originally self-published.
I thought he was, right? Yeah.
And I heard a story that the person who ended up finding him, I think, had gone online on the sort of sci-fi best-selling on Amazon and had read sort of 200 partials of different books that they sort of could see were in the top 200. And he came in and was like, this is the one, and it's the only one that we should publish. It's the only one that really is sort of good enough to sit on our list. but there are 200 top-selling sci-fi books that people are downloading and reading for free, that they're happy to download and read for free in place of books that are published. And so, yes, it's slowing through the traditional publishers' numbers, but there is still this huge numbers of ebooks that are being read by people who just want content that they're repeat readers, and they're voracious, and they don't necessarily need to read sort of a best-selling Pulitzer author each time. They just want entertainment, which is absolutely fine, because then you'll have The Martian pop out of it. I know that sounds like I'm completely obsessed by that book, but I think it's a very good example of lots of nice stories about our profession.
Well, also we love Matt Damon because he's super cool and super nice. So
who could not? Love
I mean,
Matt
who could
Damon?
not love Matt Damon?
Come on.
It's like, please. Do you think that is it harder to find the good stuff now, given that, I mean, I could go home tonight and write 20 books and put them up on Amazon, and they could totally suck?
I think it's both harder and easier in the sense that everything's electronic, so people can send things. You don't have to sort of, what I used to do is take home sort of a back-breaking amount of paper and sort of then, having damaged our environment, and sort of read it and recycled everything. You would then go back into the office. Now I can get 20 submissions come through on my email, and the good thing is I can assess them really quickly and look at the cover letters. So there is what feels like a tsunami of material out there, but I think we just have to be really proactive about the fact that we can all read really widely, and it's not elitist, and you don't need to have gone to Oxford, and you don't need to know X, who's an editor who can recommend, you don't have to have done like a creative writing course. We even do something through my agency called Pitch CB, which is through Twitter, and you just literally tweet us your pitches, 140 characters, and if an agent likes it, then you send us the pitch directly.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's a really great elevator pitch, and it's a really good way of focusing people on, can you actually describe to me your book in 140 characters? Because the best books, you often can.
And are your kids big readers? I don't mean the baby. Unless he's
Mateo's
Mensa.
struggling. We're worried. He's only 8.5 months. Yes, one of them definitely, the 13-year-old is a voracious reader. She will read anything that I put in front of her, and I absolutely love that, because I'll read alongside with her, and then we'll talk about it, and she comes down when she's finished a book, and it's sort of slightly traumatic, and she's just like, oh my God, the ending. And I'm like, I know, and it's really lovely to be able to do that about something that isn't a film, and have her talk about the characters, and she gets completely involved in the world, and she gets that really lovely glassy-eyed look you get when you've been reading for hours at a time, and you're sort of on a different astral plane somehow. You sat there with your supper, but you're really, with Katniss Everdeen or whoever, and that I love.
Do you remember that? Do you feel like that's gone now, or
that
immersion? I don't know if I wonder sometimes, because I have a 4-year-old. If having Minecraft and an iPad and access to Netflix, if it's just killing the imagination.
I don't think it helps. And I definitely see young toddlers kind of trying to swipe magazines in doctors' waiting offices, and that's a bit worrying. But interestingly, my kids all prefer reading books. They don't actually like reading on their iPads.
Really?
They don't. And I think they love watching Netflix on their iPads. Don't get me wrong, they think the iPad is the best thing ever invented. But for reading a book, they prefer to read a book. They don't like the experience. And I think maybe it's just knowing, I know you get told sort of how far through you are and things, but I think there's something, I think for me as well, reading is it's an experience not just for sight, it uses other senses, and I really love the sensation of reading and touching pages and looking at kind of the flaps and the cover, and I think it can be a really lovely experience in that way. And I think there's something of that in kids as well. I think they do respond to that.
And it's I don't think there's anything more intimate than when you read something that a writer has brought forth.
Yeah, it's a privilege. When you read things early as an agent as well, before anybody else has, you just feel like you're the luckiest person. If you're a fan of somebody, you can get your hands on the new Kate Atkinson or Lee Child, whatever genre of writer that you admire. Oh my God! I mean, just fantastic.
I need to read him. I haven't.
Lee Child is fantastic. I think Lee Child does the best action scenes of sort of any writer, and he's written a character that is notorious for men. Men want to be him, and women want to be with him, and I think he's done quite good. Done quite well off of it.
I mean, I don't think he's worried about paying the mortgage. So
no, I think he's fine.
Is it hard to I guess attain financial success
as a writer?
As a published writer without selling movie rights or TV rights?
It's incredibly hard. There were so today is Super Thursday in the UK, so there are more hardbacks being published than any other day. I think there are 300 more hardbacks being published today than the following week. The number of books that are published it's huge. The bestseller list is really the top 20. So if you're not on the bestseller list or you haven't got a really big advance, it can be very hard. A lot of writers really, really struggle. And some writers find success quite late in life, which is lovely, but they've worked incredibly hard. Poetry pays nothing. Literary fiction, unless you are, Donna Tartt, and you're sort of a renowned writer.
And you can spend 10 years writing a book.
You can spend 10 years writing a book. It's something that requires you to always be doing something else. You might be teaching, you might be, there are often other ways that you are asked to supplement your income. And then, obviously, you might be a writer who is sold in 65 territories, has films made of their books. Nicholas Sparks has a film out every year. I mean, that becomes like its own cottage industry, and it's just sort of perpetual. It's an Amazon of its own.
And I have to ask you, given that you are a mom and a cookbook writer, is your baby a picky eater?
My baby sometimes is great, it's hard not to take offense to this. Like, I'll give him an Ella's Kitchen when we're out and about, and those amazing packets, kids kind of go,
because they're full of sugar. My kid loved them too.
Yeah, so he's like, this is awesome. And then I will carefully craft an organic meal from vegetables, put it in front of him, and his reaction is, literally like a gagging reflex. And there's nothing to gag on. It's definitely deliberate, and I'll put it in, and I hear Stanley go, potato. And he's going, like this. And it's so unpleasant, and they're like, oh, God.
And he's 8 months old, so it's not like he's even doing it knowingly to upset,
No, and then he laughs. He's like, It's like, yeah, good luck getting that in me,
Yeah, mine has decided now that he doesn't like pizza. Like, he's turned his back on, he doesn't want to eat anything, so he's like, I only want candy. But we thankfully have a mutual, a friend of mine's son has 8 cavities at age 4.
Oh no.
So my child lives in fear now.
Bad.
I was like, you want candy for dinner? You want 8 cavities and have to go to the hospital? He was like, no, mommy, no, not that.
No, not that. I know the dentist is a great threat for kids.
Do you guys...
what is the process of turning a book into a movie from a literary agent's standpoint?
Well, I'm quite involved in a lot of my books, so I will sometimes sell my books myself for film. So you'll have... The decision you have to make is when you're going to submit for film. So if you are an established brand author, you can obviously submit ahead of the book being published and there being kind of any sort of excitement around the book's publication. Similarly, if you have a big debut sale, you can sell that book for film ahead of the book publishing. Tactically, it is sometimes much better to wait until the book is published and you have started to see great reviews or great sales figures. So what you would then do is you would submit to people on... You can decide, actually. You can decide if you're going to do a sort of a limited submission in the UK because it's a UK crime series and it seems appropriate that it will grow out of somewhere like Sky or ITV. Or if you have a book, like my client Rosamund Lupton's next book is set in Alaska and it feels much more appropriate that I will house that within an American studio. And she has a sort of track record for having been sold for film before. So when she's published here in, I think it's January, in hardback, I will then do a film submission here, and I will either do that in conjunction with a film agent or I will do it myself. And we will send to producers that I know, like, or I feel would be respectful of her work. And for me, the interesting thing about film is not actually selling a book for film, which ends up really being meaningless. A lot of books sell for film and they are optioned and then just sit for years and are not made. You want to place the book in the hands of somebody who you think can package it best and that they will attach talent in the form of a writer, a director, or an artist who will encourage that film to actually be made. There are many stories of actually many really fantastic books and best-selling books that have just sort of sat and sort of languished for years because there's never been any momentum behind them. So for me, the best and the most important thing to do for a book when selling for film is to just make sure that it is with people who are going to make it into a film, and it's not just going to be put on their, backlist of stuff that they've acquired.
And I want to ask you also, can you please explain the myth of the advance? Because I feel like on social media, it's so like, I got $100,000 advance, what? How does that whole thing work?
Yes, so when I sell a book, if I sold it to a publisher, they will pay an advance. It can be anything from £1,000 to several million, depending on the book. You are given that money. That is money that is paid to you in sections. So you will get part of it on signature, part of it when you have delivered and the edited and accepted version of your book. And then you will get, it's often so quarters. You'll have a quarter on signature, a quarter on delivery and acceptance, a quarter on hardback publication, and then your fourth quarter will be on your paperback publication, or sometimes if it's like a celebrity autobiography, when you've completed your press and you have turned up to do the Today Show.
They do hold you to that. Okay.
Yeah, they want you to do that to sell the book. The advance, say it's $100,000, that advance is paid to you, it's yours to keep. Your publisher then publishes your book, and for every copy that is sold of your book, you are due a royalty, and that will be something like 10% of the cover price of the book. But you don't get paid those royalties until you have earned back for the publisher your advance.
Oh.
So you have to earn in royalties $100,000, so the publisher has been sort of paid back, and then anything in excess of that, you will be paid in royalties, and you'll receive those royalties twice a year. There are 2 royalty periods, January to June and July to December.
Oh,
and you'll get those.
And do you ever have to pay back a royalty? I guess if you don't deliver the book, right?
If you don't deliver the book, if you're, say, I do a 2-book deal for somebody, they publish the first book, they never manage to deliver the second book, yes, then you can be asked to pay back the portion of your signature advance that was being applied to that second book. So some people do return.
See, that's so fascinating to me, because I feel like you read all these posts like, good job, well done, but it's like not even close to actually getting your book out there. So
no, that's the first step. Yeah. I mean, it's great, and that means you've got this buffer. Hopefully, it's enough money for you to sort of stop doing whatever other things you've been doing, sort of all the plates you've been spinning. But it can go quite quickly. You have to pay your agent 15% standardly out of that. You have to pay tax on that money. If you're a cookery book writer, you have to pay for here in the US. You have to pay your photographer and your home economist out of that money. So you get your $100,000 advance, and it's amazing, and you're a cookery writer, and you pay 15% to me, you pay the tax man, and then you have to pay $30,000 to a photographer, and suddenly you're left with not much. And by the way, you've only been paid, say, $25,000 of that to start, and you've got to somehow pay all the other pieces.
Okay, then. Yeah. Next question.
Yay, publishing.
Hi. What are some of your favorite children's books or children's authors?
Sure, I read one recently, or YA. I read An Ember in the Ashes recently. It was amazing. I love it and can't recommend it enough. I think it's really fantastic. It's set in a sort of almost Roman-like culture, a gladiatorial battle. So I read that recently. Matilda by Roald Dahl, I absolutely loved, mainly because I read so many books as a kid, and I was always hoping that I too had a superpower, which I didn't. What else did I love? I read really voraciously as a kid. I read a lot of sort of magical series. I did all of the kind of Enid Blyton stuff. But I didn't really, I'll be honest, I was never sort of in sort of love with those books. I loved reading comic books. I really read anything and everything. I read Lois Duncan, who did these really creepy books. In fact, she wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer, but she had it in a sort of much darker version. I really read anything when I was a kid, and I still read sort of a lot of the children's books. What have I read recently? I read alongside the girls, my stepchildren at home, so whatever they're reading, if they're enjoying it, I'll just end up kind of catching on.
The book that I love, that I am absolutely obsessed with, is The Book with No Pictures by B.J. Novak. The fact that he has no kids and that he wrote this brilliant children's book is like amazing to me.
I know. I'm actually really looking forward to discovering like all this sort of younger age of area of market with Mateo.
It's like amazing, and like those darn squirrels go south.
Yeah,
I mean it's like this whole world that I didn't know existed.
The amazing children's books are the ones that just everybody has on their shelves, and they really do well. Like, and the illustrations sometimes are just completely beautiful. And Quentin Blake as well. I have to say, like anything that Quentin Blake has illustrated, I think is magical.
Oh, I need to look that up.
Yeah,
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I was just curious, what's your take on movies in like the sci-fi genre, like The Martian, for example, or All You Need Is Kill, which is the movie Edge of Tomorrow that Emily was in?
Yeah.
Because those type of stories...
Did they just cut?
Sorry.
I thought they cut you off.
Yeah.
Those type of stories tend to start like right in the middle of the action, and you don't get this whole backstory to the characters, but you just get introduced to them midway through their crises. Because definitely Edge of Tomorrow had that, at least in the book, and so did The Martian. Do you think that tends to be a better way to storytell nowadays, as opposed to like introducing things from the beginning or anything like that?
In our ADD culture?
I think I think of something like The Alien. To me, that had quite a sort of slow and tense beginning, and Alien was terrifying and was sort of one of those first great, I thought, storytelling moments in that genre. And even I was watching Star Wars again the other day, and that it's actually it really does take its time in terms of setting up. And they do, I think, probably feel slower now when you watch them, as you say, in the sort of era of movie making where you sort of have to attention grab. I think it only depends on the script. I think Chris McQuarrie did a really great job on Edge of Tomorrow, making a really complicated script really sing. And I'll confess, I haven't seen The Martian yet because I haven't been able to go out because of the AMR. I'm desperate to see it. When I get home, I'm going to be watching it.
We are not being paid by Matt Damon to promote The Martian, by the way. But if Matt Damon wants to pay us, we'll totally take his money.
Yeah. I think, yes, I think probably now there is this sort of onus on making sure you can grab an audience. But I think somebody told me something really interesting recently about film is that make sure from your film that you can create the right trailer and that you need to have the right moments for your trailer. And that's something that they have to really think about for some films. When they get to the end of their incredible film and it's amazing, but do you have the moments that when you put them in a trailer is really going to sell the film and get somebody like excited to see it and saying, that's the next film I'm going to see. But I just think if you don't have a great script, you don't have a great film. And I think often what happens is you have the right person attached to it, the right director, and that's enough to just get going and we should just start filming and we'll fix everything like on the day. And it isn't fixed on the day, and it becomes clunky and difficult, and it's very hard to fix it in the edit afterwards, whether it's a slow beginning or a fast beginning.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hashtag Book Whisperer.